In closing this evening, I'd like to talk to you all about a great American and great lady I knew nothing of until recently. She was a celebrity of sorts and a great grandmother of women's liberation in America. Her name was Julia Ward Howe, and she is remembered with affection because of the words she wrote for one of the greatest American songs ever written. The music for the song started well ahead of the words she wrote. It started in churches and eventually moved onto the battlefields. It began as a hymn and grew to be the most heart-quickening marching song in our nation's history. It's quite a story, and one befitting our 4th of July celebration this evening. Before the Civil War erupted, there was an angry man named John Brown who tried to start a civil war all on his own. Brown was a man who believed not only that slavery was wrong, but that something had to be done about it, that slaves had to be set free, by force if necessary. So he and his sons and a few others picked up their guns and tried to do just that. It didn't work, of course. No one was freed, and men died. Brown was eventually caught by a company of U.S. Marines, charged with treason, tried, and sentenced to be hanged. His last words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "You can dispose of me very easily," he said, standing on the scaffold about to be hanged. "But this other matter has not been disposed of. This Negro matter, the end of that is not yet." Brown had no idea his life would have bookends stamped in American history. As a child, he lived briefly in Ohio with Jesse R. Grant, father of future Union General and U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant. His capture was made under the command of Colonel Robert E. Lee, who would remain instrumental in this American divide and later command the Confederate forces. And in the crowd at his execution was a soon-to-be Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, presidential assassin John Wilkes Booth, and American poet Walt Whitman. He was either a martyred hero or a bloodthirsty villain. It's a debate that continues to this day. So they buried John Brown, and not too long after, his private battle engulfed America with such fury that it almost tore this great nation in half. And early on in that terrible Civil War of ours, some soldiers picked up on that half-forgotten hymn and improvised some words. And pretty soon, an army was marching to it. Maybe what old John Brown had done in life was unlawful, but the spirit moving him was freedom. A spirit in America we like to think will never die. And that's the sense of what the soldiers were singing. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Those words would eventually carry the whole Union Army into battle. Well, Miss Julia Ward Howe was the lady who transformed the song into the battle hymn of the Republic, the whole Republic, a nation, as Miss Howe's admirer Abraham Lincoln would later say, was dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That song was for all of us to sing and all of us to live by. It was November in 1861. She'd had a sleepless night at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C., and somehow, just before dawn, those words all came to her, all at once, almost as if another hand had written them and passed them along to her. So Miss Julia Howe got up out of her hotel bed, found an old stub of a pen, and as daybreak broke across the Capitol dome, sat down at the window and got it all written down before the sunlight reached the paper. Those words of her still help to bind and hold us together today. A song not for half a nation to march to, but for a whole people to stand up and sing together. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on.